Hello everybody and welcome to another episode. In today's episode I'm going to show you how to remove the DPF filter or the turbine from a Nissan Qashqai with a 1.6 dci engine. On this car I had a problem with the DPF filter, so I removed it and I decided, guys, to show you what you have to do and how you have to do it, because in this car it's very difficult to reach the DPF filter or the turbine and remove them. So I decided to show you guys some steps which I used and what you have to do in order for you to replace and remove this part. So I already sent this part to someone which cleaned it, and now I'm ready to install it back on the car. So this is how it's looking. This is the size of the DPF filter and all the sensor locations, and also this is the EGR cooling valve. So this is one of the valves which is attached to the DPF, and you have to remove it if you want to remove the DPF filter from the car. So first you'll have to remove this cooling reservoir, and after that you'll have to remove the DPF itself. So this is how it's looking. I also replaced the DPF filter along with the one oxygen sensor situated right here at the top of this muffler. This is how it's looking from inside the DPF, and this is the size of the DPF from this car. It's a very difficult job to do. I don't recommend you guys to do it if you don't have some knowledge and if you don't have some skills and some space to do it. As well, you can see, in order for me to remove the DPF, I also had to remove this mechanism which sends the power to the rear wheels. So I think it's called the differential in English. So this is also what I have to remove, and also this is the top part of the turbine. This is some plastic side, some plastic parts which is located right here in this position, and I also had to remove this one in order for me to remove the other parts. So it's a very difficult job. I don't recommend you guys to do it, like I said earlier, if you don't have the knowledge. I think it's better for you to pay someone to do it and just be sure that the job is did right, and you won't have any problems in the future, because you can have some problems. Probably some bolts will be stuck, probably some bolts will broke because of the heat, because of the rust, and it will create you even more problems than you already have. This is how the turbine is looking, and you won't be able to remove the turbine if you don't remove the DPF filter on this car. So if you have a problem with your turbine, you'll have to remove the DPF filter first and all the other parts, and only after that you will reach the 3 bolts which are holding the turbine mounted onto the manifold, into the exhaust manifold, and only after remove those 3 bolts from underneath, you will be able to remove the other bolts from the top and remove the turbine from the car. It's a very difficult job, like I said earlier, and this is how the space is looking. This is how small space it is right here. This is where the differential was installed. You'll have to remove the axle, the right side axle. You'll have to remove all the mounting supports from the engine. I also put a socket right here to push the engine and keep it pushed in the front of the vehicle, just to create more space. And as you can see, right here is the other screws which are holding the turbine mounted onto the car. As you can see here, it's my axle along with all the mounting brackets and along with all the hardware. You'll have to remove this hub from the shock absorber along with the tie rod end, and you'll have to do all of these things in order for you to replace the DPF filter or to remove it. You'll also have to drain the gearbox completely. This is a manual gearbox, and you'll have to drain the oil completely, because when you are going to replace or remove the axle from the gearbox, the oil will leak down. So what you'll have to do is to remove the oil first from the gearbox, and only after that you'll have to remove the axle and all the other parts. You'll have to remove this part of the exhaust with the flap mounted on it. On this car you'll have a flap mounted on this part of the exhaust. You will also have all of these other parts which you will have to remove. It's a very difficult job, like I said earlier. I'm not going to stop telling you this, because it's a very hard job to do, and I don't recommend you guys to do it, because it will create you some bad days. It took me 1 day to remove it, one completely day to remove everything, because also even for me it was very difficult. You'll have to remove this engine from the windscreen wipers, and you'll also have to remove all of this plastic from the top of the engine, because otherwise you won't have access to the bolts which are located behind the turbine and all of the other parts. The most difficult part for me was to remove the differential. The differential was holding in 5 bolts, I think. I'm not sure exactly how many of them was, and the 2 bolts from the top was very hard to reach. You have to use a key with a 60mm size on it, and it will be very difficult to remove those 2 bolts. Also, it's difficult to install the brackets which are holding the DPF filter mounted onto the car. You will also have some trouble when you're going to install it back onto the car, because the space is so small and you don't have room to do a wrong move, let's say in this way, because you have to do it perfectly. You have to figure out the best position which will help you to do this job a little bit easier. This is all the brackets from the top. This is right here. You'll also have all the cables from the sensors. Make sure you remember all the cables position and where all the cables goes. I recommend you guys to take some pictures with everything that you remove, just in case that you want to know exactly where they was installed earlier. So I recommend to take some pictures just to make sure that you will know in the future when you're going to put it back together where everything goes. I also cleaned the EGR valve. This is the EGR valve on this car. You'll have 2 bolts which you'll have to remove, and in some cases, in my case for example, came out very hard. I had to use some wooden sticks and also a rubber hammer to hammer it just a little bit and create me some space and push it around, and eventually it came out, and I cleaned it and I installed it back on the car. So this is the coolant reservoir for the EGR. This is the gas recirculation valve, something like that. This is how it's called. And also these are all the sensors mounted onto the DPF. So those are the locations. If you want to replace some sensors, I recommend you guys to do it now with everything removed from the car, because in this way it will be a little bit easier for you to install them and to replace them. I will keep posting videos like this. I will keep showing you guys where everything goes. As you can see right here, I already installed the DPF filter back onto the turbine. Those are the 3 bolts mounted at the top. This is how it's looking from this side. This is where the DPF filter goes along with the hoses. Also, this is where the other cables are located and how they are installed. And this is also how you have to install it on your car. If you have this exact engine, this is a job that you have to do if you want to do it yourself and then not pay anyone else to do it in your place. As you can see, I put it here, this socket, just to keep the engine pushed forward and create me some space to work with the DPF. I installed the brackets which are holding the DPF mounted onto the engine. This is how everything goes. Sorry guys if the video is not perfectly made. It was very difficult for me even to remove them, but also to film everything. So I'm just showing you some sections where everything goes and how you will have to do it, and probably it will help you just a little bit and you will be able to do it yourself. I recommend you guys to have another person which will help you to push the things, which will help you to hold the things until you secure them. This is the location of the oxygen sensor or of the lambda sensor. It has different names for this sensor. So if you want guys to install the differential back onto the gearbox, I recommend you to have another person and which will help you to hold the DPF filter, because if you want to install the differential back onto the gearbox, the DPF filter must be disconnected from all the corners. The DPF filter doesn't have to be installed onto the turbine, because if you install it onto the turbine, it will not have, you will not have enough space to put the differential back into the gearbox, because the space is so small. So you'll have to disconnect the DPF filter, and you will only have to hold it into the position just in front of the 3 nuts which are holding it mounted onto the turbine. So you'll have to hold it right there, and after that you'll have to put someone to push back and to install back the differential on the gearbox, and only after that you'll have to push everything and secure them completely. So as you can see, those are the bolts which are holding the differential mounted onto the gearbox. The space is so small here and it's very difficult to do it alone. So this is why I tell you guys to have someone else which will help you and which will create enough space for you to install the other parts. This is how it's looking from underneath. So the differential is installed. This is how small the space is. So like I said earlier, if the turbine is installed in its place, the differential won't go inside the gearbox, because it will hit the DPF filter and it will not have space to go inside the gearbox. So you'll have to just hold the DPF filter in its position, and you'll have to push the differential first, and after that you'll have to secure everything as it was before. you have to remove the bolts which are securing the differential all around. You'll have to use a 16mm socket or wrench, something like that. It doesn't matter which one you use, you just have to remove the bolts. As you can see, this is the exhaust flap and the exhaust pipe, which I already installed and which I already mounted onto the DPF filter. This is one bracket which is holding the exhaust mounted onto the subframe. You will also have to install it or to remove it if you want to remove the exhaust pipe. And right here in this location, all the engine mounted supports and all the supports from the axle, it's where they are installed on this engine, on these little holes. After that, here I have a lot of pipes which goes right at the top of the engine next to the turbine. There is the location for those pipes. I will show you guys in a second where everything goes. Also, this is one bracket which is holding the differential mounted onto the engine, and this is what secured them all together. And right here, as you can see, I installed all the hoses from the coolant valve. And as you can see, if you want to remove this valve or if you want to install it, you'll have this little screw right here hidden under the engine. So for me, this one was also a little bit difficult to remove, but it can be done. You just have to take your time and have a little patience, and it will be possible to do it. I also recommend you guys to have a little mirror which will help you to see in the little corners or in the deep space where everything is installed and where you will have to put your tools to remove them. As you can see, this is one filter from the valve, and I recommend you guys to clean it very good and make sure you don't have any debris left inside there, because if you have anything which can clog the filter, the coolant will now pass through the coolant valve, and it will create an overheating problem in the future. So just make sure that everything is good and it's ready to be installed on the car. After that, as you can see, this valve goes right here in this position, right at the top of this cooling valve, and also after that this pipe goes right here in this position. This is how you have to install it. Make sure you put the correct type of bolts, which you remove them in the correct space. I recommend you to take pictures with every bolt which you will remove, because otherwise you won't remember which bolt goes where, and in this way you will install different bolts in different spaces and it will not be good. As you can see right here, I installed everything back on the car. I installed this pipe, I installed the sensors and everything which goes on the turbine. This is how it's looking. So right here at the top of the engine, everything installed, everything is as it should be. I'm done with installing the parts from the top of the engine. I will only have to install later the windscreen wipers and all the other parts. And from under the engine, right here, I also installed the bracket which is holding the differential mounted onto the engine. This is how it's looking, and this is how you will have to install it in this position. I will only have to tighten the bolts later. After that, I will have to install the engine mounting support. I already installed the mounting support from the axle. I'm not going to film everything, guys, because the video will be too long, and I'm in a little bit of rush. And this is the engine support. I will only have to install this one and the axle and all the little other hardware parts. Guys, I hope you will be able to do it yourself. Thank you all for watching. If you like this video and found it informative, please leave a like and a comment down below. See you next time, and wish you the best.